hey, if you have 500 bucks, like spend the 500 bucks. Spend the $10 or $20 a day on stuff, test different creatives, look at that stuff and learn that stuff.
Hey, it's Michael. Today, I'm sitting down with my good friend Joe for an interview on the experts of the roundtable. We first connected on Facebook, then met in person at a local mastermind, and I've been consistently blown away by his expertise in leadership and operations. He's genuinely one of the sharpest minds I know in the business world, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you. So let's dive in.
And then I knew what it felt like to have to close a business because it totally fell apart and failed, right? But it's not. They're a liar. That's emotional. Had to have the breathalyzer device on my car for 2.5 years, or almost 3 years, actually.
What is up? I'm here with Joe DiRoma. Joe is a master COO. He's been COO for some of the biggest coaches in the business. And when I say COO, it's the chief orgasm officer with those with those Greek god curls. And I'll let Joe continue the introduction. It's great to have you here, brother.
Oh man, I don't even know what to say about that. Other than I started growing out my hair in my 40s. I never even knew I had curly hair. So you learn something new every day. I could have had these Greek god curls my entire life, causing massive orgasms throughout my whole life. And yet I've let everyone, including all the women I was with, down my entire life until I looked like this.
Save it for the best one.
Yeah, exactly. So, so a little bit about me. I'm 42 years old. So, in our business, that's like ancient, everyone's in their 20s and early 30s. So I hang out with a bunch of, you young guys, and it keeps me young, and it helps too that I look young. So everyone's always like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You can think I'm 30. And then it's like, I have these 12 more years of experience that I can hide behind this pretty face. So really for me, I came into the digital marketing world by way of restaurants before. So I spent about 15 years in restaurant operations. And that's where I really kind of cut my chops in terms of enhancing my business acumen, learning how to run a business properly, ins and outs of basic operations, marketing, leadership, training, hiring, like all of the facets that you need in order to run a successful business, and also the added complexities of fresh food, fresh produce, drinks, booze, and basically like running a live event in your dining room, every day is essentially what it is. It's like, oh, there's going to be 300 or 400 people here every day. So I had a great run there and I loved it, man. It's like the island of misfit toys, for like guys like us that just have made an absolute mess of our life. It's like there's a bunch of degenerates that you can go and work really hard with and have fun there, but you can really impact people. And really, it was a great playground for me on how to run a business, because again, if you can run the most complex business in the world, then you can run anything because the principles apply. So, and then 100%. I got into the digital marketing world back in 2020 when that company I was with had some layoffs, and it was a good time to transition. So super passionate about copywriting. You and I have talked about that before. And I love advertising and I love marketing and I love being around it. I'm not super gifted at it, right? Like just because I'm passionate about it doesn't mean that I'm great at it, so my taking on the operations role in our industry is definitely a big hole I see in a lot of our businesses, because again, it is so much marketing and sales front end focused that a lot of so again, I was able to carve out a very valuable place for myself with some big names in the space and add a lot of value to people, which we talked about all the time, right? Like you got to add big value to big names and you can make big paydays as a result of that. You can do the same with operations as you can do with marketing and sales. So personally, just to touch on that real quick, little intro. I've been with my wife now for a little over 12 years. You know her. She's amazing and definitely very different than me, but the same, if you know. Been married about, man, coming up on 7 years in November. I have a teenage son, which is awesome. He just started high school. And then just to really spice up my life a lot and add some more learning for myself in terms of patience, we're having a baby girl in 2 months. So I'll have a newborn and a teenager at the same time. So yeah, that definitely deserves a round of applause. So
no, love it, man. Yeah, but dude, when we were at dinner, or you came over for dinner not too long ago, we kind of started talking about like war stories and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, I need to have you on this podcast because with everything that you've been able to create, it didn't start that way.
no.
Like not at all. If you want to kind of take us back to like what your life was before all of this, like before the restaurant even.
Yeah, sure. So when I was around my son's age that he is now, I had already been in a residential psychiatric hospital for deep depression and wanting to take my own life and just not wanting to be here. And so as a result of having a lot of those types of feelings and that thinking going on, I sought out a way to self-medicate myself. Right. So that's kind of when I was 13 or 14, I think, when I discovered drugs and alcohol, and it works, man.
I was around the same age, and dude, I
started late, started real late, like,
yeah. Just definitely trying to medicate and just forget about all the shit that I kind of was going through at that time. Like, how were you feeling back then? Like, what were some of the emotions and everything that were kind of going through your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I have done a lot of work to uncover kind of what was going on back then. You have to kind of revisit the past in order to really learn. So, the summer before high school, my uncle, my dad and I went over to his house, and he was there. His roommate said he was sleeping, but he was actually had OD'd in his bed. Oh, wow. From speedballing. And then about, I think 2 or 3 months later, my grandfather died on my first day of high school, which was a rapid occurrence of like very aggressive cancer. So he found out that he had it the end of 95 and he was gone by August of 96. Wow. Because it spread to his pancreas and stuff. And this guy was, he was like my damn hero, man. Very spiritual man. He left the Catholic seminary when he met my Nana. So he was like going to be a priest and stuff. So he was like Mensa level intelligence, all these master's degrees and worked in social work at Boys Town. So very much a socially engaging contribution type man, and just a giant and great sense of humor, funny, all around just hero. And at that time, I was also being confirmed in the Catholic Church, and my confirmation teacher was very much a doom and gloom type God teacher, right? Old Testament, eye for an eye type shit. And the culmination of kind of all of those things happening together, it led me to believe that, number one, if this is the type of God that we have in this world, I don't definitely want any part of that type of shit. I don't want to have any connection with that type of God. I didn't have any understanding as to why God would take such a good man and leave such trash around every day, and all these other people that ain't doing shit, but they're living. So again, the very uncertainty and complexities of life as a young person, I didn't. But again, all of those things in that moment, I was such a selfish person that they were happening to me. Right? Like I'm the only person that's ever lost a grandparent or an uncle or questioned, God's presence or questioned God's judgment and justice. Like I'm the only person on the planet that's ever happened to. And so when you're a victim like that, it can rot you from the inside out. But the problem is that I needed to change the way that I felt so much because it was too bright. It was too powerful. It was too painful. And I just couldn't stomach it. Right. And so around that same time as well, I went to a soccer school and I loved soccer. like obsessed with it. It was my whole life. And I was also really good at it. The school I was at, the coaches didn't like me. And even though, being one of the better players, I never made the team, JV or varsity, my freshman, sophomore, or junior year.
Damn.
And there was no reason for it other than they just didn't like me. They didn't like me as who I was, loud, aggressive, and just kind of in your face, super extroverted. And I didn't play, I guess, their style. I don't know. I never have found out. And my parents, they couldn't really give me a reason. So again, these things are happening without reason, like these very powerful, impactful things in my life. And it's just like, why be here?
Yep.
Like, you take this, you take that, and not for nothing. Right. And so I was just too young and naive to understand that that's just how life is. And I didn't have the tools to be able to manage my emotions and all of that stuff in a healthy way.
Yep.
So I began acting out, began self-harm, deeply depressed, and all that stuff led me to want to change the way I felt, man. And like I said before, I found something that really works, and it did work until it didn't work anymore. But it definitely took me on a path of a totally different direction than what I was taught, how I was raised, the values I was raised with, but also not what I envisioned for my life.
It's wild how many kids go through that. And like I went through something very similar where I was really, really good at hockey. I could have definitely gone pro. And then 16, I got into a fight. I landed on probation. I was on 90-day probation for 2 years. I finally got off my senior year of high school. I tried out for the varsity team. And because I didn't play for 2 years, because I was going through the system and I was just one thing after another, they brought me into the locker room and they pretty much told me, they're like, look, Michael, you are good enough to be on the team. So I don't want you to think that you're not. But because you haven't played in 2 years, we really can't put you on the team because parents will make too much of a fuss about it. And it's like, that fucking broke me, man. Like, that was just another thing that was like, you know what? Fuck these people. Fuck the world. Like, how could all of this happen? And then my stepdad was really abusive growing up, and I was in the Catholic Church, and I had these same feelings of like, if there is a God, how could a God put me through so much dark fucking shit? And I lost my faith for a long time. I did end up kind of rebuilding that relationship and everything there, but like it took a lot of work, like that inner work that you were talking about.
Yeah, it does for sure. Yeah. And the thing is too, is like you said, we were trading some war stories and stuff like that. During that 13-year run that I had, man, of that just absolute madness, I got in trouble with the law as well. I was arrested 8 times, 8 separate times, all drug and alcohol related, and tons of just absolute madness. I was a blackout drinker. So there was a lot of times where, my mom was waking me up on the front lawn in the morning. She'd go to get the newspaper and she would put the newspaper next to me. I'm passed out in the planter or whatever. And, she's taking a picture of me, the old 35 millimeter cameras. Remember that? Like, you got to get the film developed and shit. So, we can laugh about it now. And, even my mom and I can laugh about it now, but it was just absolute madness.
Yeah.
And it's like, the things that I thought were okay or rationalized in my mind that were okay to do to others, to take from others, to harm others. Like I said, I was never taught that. So that was all stuff that I learned and lied to myself about being okay with. The problem is that once you get into that cycle of behaving that way, well, then you have to keep medicating yourself because you feel so shitty about yourself all the time. So it's like this consistent pattern that, you have to break out of. And it's a terrible place to be in. And so now with my son, just starting his freshman year. And the thing that you were talking about is kind of what him and I have been talking about, is that this like rite of passage, which culturally we just don't, Western society has a shit freaking context, cultural context of even recognizing this at all, right? Like it's a spiritual death, it's the death of the child. And now you have to accept that it's not an actual death, it's a spiritual death that's happening, but it feels like you're really dying because you're like, damn, now I got all these responsibilities. I got to do all this work and I have to do all this shit. This shit kind of sucks. Not only that, you got all these hormones going through you. You know, if you're like me, you're all small and pimple faced, you just feel uncomfortable and you look like shit. You feel like shit. And then it's like, and you also feel like, you know, you're dying. And then you're around a bunch of other people that kind of feel the same, you know, smoking, ripping cigs and listening to Alice in Chains and shit in your freaking dark little holes, you know, like that's what we were doing back because I'm older. So it was like all freaking, you know, like grungy shit. And it's like, but no one has this celebration. No one has this ceremony of this transition that happens in life to all humans. Like no one's alone in the fact that it's only happening to them, right? Yeah. But we don't talk about it enough. We don't have anything set up. You know, the things that I've researched and some people that I'm close with, the Native Americans did a great job with it. So, you know, I've been looking at that stuff with one of my buddies for my son, but it's like now I just have very, very open conversations with my son about, you know, hey, tell me about what's going on. What are you feeling? You know, what's surfacing for you? Like, what's going on? Okay, great. Like, you know, this is that, and getting some explanation to him about the fact that like, no, dude, you're not weird. You know, because when you're a teenager, you're like, man, I'm just fucking weird. You know, like that's the word you use for everything. And it's like, no, this is actually a very normal and necessary process of the human experience. It just makes you feel fucking weird, you know? Like,
yeah. And even that, like some of us might be a little fucking weird, but when it comes down to it, like I tell Athena, like, look, you might be a little weird. I know she can't really understand. I was like, you're weird. I'm weird. Your mom's weird, but weird is actually cool because weird means you're different.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the human experience, I totally agree. I don't think that we have a way in the United States, at least, to really do that transition. It's like, okay, you're 18 years old, you're out on your own, and it's just kind of left at that. There's no real like education on like what is actually going to happen and all of that. So that's awesome that you're teaching your son that, because a lot of us men can definitely use that, especially with the feeling thing, because I feel like a lot of men are taught not to feel their feelings, so we just kind of bury it down and we end up getting on drugs and stuff like that in order to really hide those feelings. Because I know back in the day when I would like cry a little bit when I was a kid, I'd be like, my stepdad would call me a pussy and say, I'm going to give you something to cry about, and like stuff like that. And like, it's natural, dude. Like,
yeah, that's super healthy.
Yeah. So
quit being a little bitch, you know, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, take me through those 13 years. Like, what was like that rock bottom moment for you that was like, okay, I need to change this because this is not the life that I wanted to live?
Yeah, it was 2 months before my son was getting ready to be born. So this is the beginning of 2009. And I got arrested again for second DUI. So that's 2 within 5 years. So facing some pretty stiff penalties for that. And I'm now going to be soon responsible for this other human being. And I was just tired, man. You know, like the recovery communities always talk about being sick and, you know, just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like that shit is so real. And that's like a universal principle too of anybody that's ready for change. Like you're tired of the way that you're living. And I was just fed up, and I had no place else to really go. And I had nothing else that I could really do other than say, you know what? I have to face the music now, and I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, I need to get some help.
Yeah.
And that's a very hard thing for people to do. That's a very hard thing, like you were saying, for men to do, to put up your hand and say, man, I need some help. I can't, this is what I'm doing is not working at all. Right. And so that rock bottom moment was definitely propelled by the imposing consequences of the Florida Department of Corrections, because people are always like, well, I can do whatever I want. Well, you can. You certainly can.
If you don't get caught.
If you are a threat to society, there is another higher power. It's not God, but it kind of can be like God in your life that will come and take you against your will and put you somewhere until you know how to behave properly. And from my experience, if you try to fight those people from taking you, they will beat you and they will beat you to the ground and you will wake up in jail and you are beat up. So just a disclaimer for anybody that's listening. I know Mike said I could get a little bit dark here on this podcast. Don't fight the police. From personal experience, you will not win. So in case anyone's wondering. Yeah. So, but the thing is that so the impending consequences of something that I could not run from anymore or blame someone else or any of those things. It was my sole responsibility, coupled with the fact that, man, I wanted to be a good dad. Like I really, really wanted that, So again, I made the decision to go get some help and for my alcoholism. And then, I'm somebody that when I make a decision to do something, I am all in, bro. I'm like you, dude. I'm a fucking addict. Like I'm all in on something. Like it's like I rather do nothing than do a little bit of something. Like I'm all in on that shit. So I ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction from that guy who I was, but it's hard because just because you stop putting substances in your body doesn't mean you're fixed. You have to figure out why you were putting them in you in the first place.
Yep.
You're actually become a little bit even crazier once you stop, because in your whole family and everything's like, dude, I thought you stopped this stuff. Like you're still a madman. And it's like this thing that I was using to medicate myself from what all of my problems and pains and fears and hurt and all these things for 13 years. Well, I removed my medicine.
And everything just comes to the surface and just fucking explodes.
Because now you're actually in life.
Yeah.
You're not just numb. So it was rough. I didn't have a license for 2.5 years. I got revoked for 5 years. But after 2.5 years, I got the business purposes only with like this super high visibility program called SSS, Special Supervision Services. So like you have to be sober to even get into it, prove all of that stuff. You have to go meet with them. Had to have the breathalyzer device on my car for 2.5 years or almost 3 years, actually. Yeah. That was funny. The first time I took Allie on a date with that fucking blower in my car. It's like, oh my God, what is that? I'm like, keep your ass away from this thing. Don't even look at it. I'm picking you up from brass tap. Leave this thing alone. So, and I had to do jail time. It was mandatory. I had to pay tons of fines. My mom always tells me I definitely could have paid for a home in cash money with all the money I gave to the state of Florida for my poor behavior. I had to have somebody run my life again. Because from the time I was 14 until past 30, there was only about a 2.5 year window where I wasn't under supervision from the state of Florida. My mom and I calculated it. That's a long time to have somebody running your life and dictating your, what you need to do and where to be and all that stuff. That's not freedom. So I started to behave and act accordingly,
So then after that, when did you start getting into the restaurants? I believe you were working for I can't think of the restaurant.
Yeah.
name.
Bonefish Grill. I was there for 10 years.
You were a server for 10 years?
No. That's actually a really great story. I went back there, or I went back to serving tables to go and say, hey, I'm going to get a college degree. it's kind of just the cultural norm, right? Like, oh, I need to go and do this because, I dropped out of high school. I got a GED. I did a couple of junior college classes, but I never did shit. I wasn't good at academics. I wasn't a disciplined student. I had no desire to put any work in that area. But I'm like, this is what you're supposed to do.
Which is crazy though, because
go to college.
like you're one of the most intelligent people that I've talked to, like in anybody that I've talked to, which is
wow, dude. Thank you, bro.
Of course, man. Especially
shit.
Like the amount of discipline that you have, I'm sure that helped, like getting the discipline, going through all the shit that you've gone through and being in the system and stuff like that. Cause I know that's kind of what helped me is like, you have to have discipline going through that, because if you don't, then you're going to find your ass back in behind a cell door.
Yeah. Yeah, the beating stick is a great weapon for guys like us. It's like, I don't want to get beat anymore. This is enough, Yeah. So, I mean, like back then it was, okay, I'm going to start serving tables. I had been a manager at a restaurant, multiple restaurants, like before everything crashed and burned. I was manning a Japan shop when all this stuff happened and went down, left there. So, it's like, hey, let's reset here, right? You have a new opportunity. And when my son's mom asked me to leave, she booted me out. I was 8 months sober. I had just finished house arrest. Damien was, 6 months old. I had no job, no car, no bank account, nothing. I had a cell phone. That's it. And, I had to start all over again. So I'm like, okay, I had a buddy that was working at this restaurant and he got me in and I interviewed and did well and they brought me on and bro, I flourished. It was culturally, it was a great place to be. I was there with great leadership and I was a couple of months in and I get a call from my managing partner at the time, my buddy Andreas, who's still my friends this day. He's amazing. And he said, hey, can you come in early today? Like 45 minutes early. Me and Alan want to talk to you about something. I'm like, about what? He's like, just come in. We'll talk about it. I'm like, oh, fucking A, man.
Yeah, you never know.
It's like, God damn it. And then you're like searching in your mind. You're like,
what did I do?
Did I sexually harass anyone? Did I say anything out of line? I know I wasn't drinking with anybody, this time. I haven't slept with any of the staff. Okay, I don't know what they got on me. So then I get there and it was totally different. It was, hey, we know you have restaurant management experience, you are a great fit here. What do you think about being a manager, with Bonefish? And, of course, it always feels great to be wanted, so whether it's right for you or not, you have to make that decision for yourself. But everyone it's great for the ego to feel wanted and to be driven and have somebody want more from you and contribute more. But rather than just jumping into it, my whole life, I made impulsive decision after impulsive decision. And I just jerked my whole life around with blah, 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 doing this and that. And I said, so for the first time, I said, you know what, let me think about it and pray about it for a month. And then I'll come back to you guys. Cause this isn't what I had in mind of what I envisioned the path of my life going, right? So I did that and I talked to, trusted mentors. I'm a big believer in that. That's another thing that has helped me transform my life big time is having way older, highly experienced, highly successful people in my life that I really want what they have. And I, speak with them about, the things that I'm working on and the decisions I'm making.
Yeah.
And not go to talk to everybody looking for the answers that I want to hear. Talk to select few of people that you can bounce shit off of because they're not emotionally tied to the outcomes, which is vitally important for decision making.
Yep.
So yeah, I made the decision to do it. And it ended up being a transformative experience for me in terms of really a great wild ride for my life, man. So then, I still have it saved on my phone. I took a picture of my LinkedIn profile And it showed, it's just like 10-year run. It's like server, assistant manager, culinary manager, finishing manager, managing partner, manager productivity. So it's like in that 10-year run, so you start serving tables as an hourly associate. Then you're, an assistant manager running front of the house, teams. Then you're running the kitchen. Then you do your finishing school. And then I was managing partner of a $4 million restaurant for 5 years, and then ended with overseeing productivity for the entire $600 million organization. So 189 restaurants, right? So it's like, of course, there's a lot of shit that went on throughout that time. But when I got laid, and that maybe this will help some people, when I got laid off, I wasn't real bitter about it because it had given me so much. I felt like I did everything I could do too, right? Like it stung and it hurt, and you have to go through the sadness and the pain and the loss, but it was like, it was okay. Plus they were like, hey, we're going to give you a severance. I'm like, you're going to give me money not to come to work? This is fucking amazing for a degenerate like me. But then it was like, hey, that experience taught me, hey, it's time to set new 10-year goals.
Love that.
So for those of the people that are in our business where it's like, we got to scale to the moon in the next 30 days and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And that's great. And it's marketing. And I understand all that. But it's like, hey, what does your life look like and for the next 10 years and how you want to be doing it? And like, how do you want to be spending your time? And what is the value that you can bring? And since I've done that, like for some reason, shit in our industry has just worked out really, really well for me. Because I had that 10 years of forging myself and my skills and my achievements and all of those things, that no one can take any of that from you because you've really done it, right? So if you're in midlife and you're looking to transition similar to what I did, understand that all of those skills are transferable. Like a lot of times we get hung up, oh, it's a totally different industry. I don't know if yes, you can. Yes, you can do that. So, yeah, I mean, it was a great run. And it's always good for me to look at that picture and remind myself when I'm in the thick of the shit that we're doing, you know what I mean? Where it's like you're tracking everything daily, you're looking at all this shit, and it's like, okay, well, what's this going to look like in a year or 2 years or 10 years?
I love that. No, I think like that's helped me a lot is when I started mapping out the next 10 years and kind of reverse engineering on, okay, what's the next 5 years? And then what do I got to do this year? Okay, what do I got to do this quarter? What do I got to do this month? And it's super, super powerful. Did you know that like you wanted to come into being like a COO for coaches, or like how did that all begin?
Yeah, it was, it was really kind of cool. It was, so when I got laid off, I got into coaching myself. So when I was at the restaurant, I had trained to become an ontological coach, which is ontology is the metaphysical study of being, right? Or being, body, emotion, and language. And that was kind of coupled with organizational leadership for personal and professional mastery, right? So very much focused in terms of helping shape teams, helping executives communicate properly, kind of like all of this higher level stuff to be able to transform teams, transform culture, and generate breakthrough results in businesses, right?
Yeah.
And I had met a friend of mine, connected me with someone that was starting to lead a men's movement in the US. So I connected with him and I jumped on that and I started coaching men. And, that was a great experience because I got to learn so much. I got to learn about business partnerships and how they can not end up working out no matter how much effort and compassion and everything else you put in, and that you need to treat it like a marriage. And it's very much that real. I learned about, doing 10 and 20 grand months and feeling really good about your ability to close on the phone and market and all that stuff and do webinars. And then I knew what it felt like to have to close a business because it totally fell apart and failed. Right. So then when that happened, I had gone through all of Rudy Moore's programs because we were buddies. We did an event together way back like in 2018 or something. And so 2020, the lockdowns happened, he did like the 30-day quarantine challenge, and then he did the business accelerator. And so I did all that stuff and consumed everything. I was eating up all sorts of Halbert and Ogilvy and Sugarman and all the Russell Brunson stuff, and just pounding myself full of knowledge and writing copy like crazy and blah, blah, blah. And did all that. And so I was in, Rudy texted me. I was one of the first people in his mastermind. And then when the business and everything fell apart, I texted him and I said, hey, are you looking for any ops people? Are you looking for any project managers? I was like, this all, he knew what happened. He had a front row seat to see what happened. Right. So, and let me say that I consciously made the decision to then go back to work, because it was like I could start working on another business or whatever. But Allie wanted to start her business. Allie's my wife. And so one of the things I learned about markets is that there's not a huge thirsty market for men lining up to work on themselves.
Yep.
In case anybody's wondering, it's incredibly difficult to make money in that market. Now, middle-aged women in their 50s wanting to do Pilates, those ladies are buying fucking everything. Okay. They'll buy a question mark from you if it looks right. Like that's how hungry and large and very abundant that market is. So I'm like, okay. Plus she stood by me when I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I said, well, let's give you a shot now. And now I had already built all these skills to be able to support her in the best way possible from a operational standpoint, building all her shit, doing all the things we do for the wives, but then it was like, hey, I need to be able to fund that. I need to be able to keep our lifestyle at the level it is. So I text Rudy. I'm like, hey, what about this? And then it's been off to the races since then, man. He brought me on and we had a lot of success. We did a lot of amazing things. I then had a good run with our boy, Scott Olford, who's another great entrepreneur. And now I'm with Dan Henry. So just getting plugged in with these high level guys. But so throughout that whole thing and getting plugged into these circles with coaching tons and tons and tons of businesses and helping them and working through it and talking with high level guys, there was something I continuously noticed time after time again. And that is that there's a lack of integrators in our space.
Yep.
So I was kind of like, and I'm kind of a combo, visionary integrator combo. I can kind of like do both. But being in the restaurant world, you had to be a great integrator. You didn't fucking make money. So I had learned all those skills. Plus corporate is great for systems and processes and SOPs, which is a high part of integrator process.
Yep.
So, you go where you can contribute the most value. That's also coupled with the fact that it aligns with what I'm gifted at, right? Like I said before, I love copywriting, but I'm never going to be a Michael Kelly or a Dan Henry or a Kevin Rogers. That's just never going to happen for me, right?
Yeah.
My gifts are leadership, communication, right? Project management, managing people, hiring, these types of things, to where those are things that high-level businesses need desperately. So you can add a lot of value there. So that's kind of how I slid into that and kind of carved out a reputation as the ops guy. And I implore people to do the same. Like, don't battle with yourself about what your gifts are. Just find what your gifts are and then find ways to add value with them.
Yep. No, 100%. So I know, like, working with Dan Henry, you get to see a lot of like lower level coaches, people that are like maybe $10,000, $20,000 a month. You notice any like trends that kind of keep them around that mark, that kind of hurt them from being able to get to that 100K month?
Oh, so let me bounce this back to you. So you're asking, hey, what is it that you've seen specifically that 10 and 20K a month coaches are blocked from being able to go to 100K?
Yeah.
The ability to, one of the number one ways is the ability to add other traffic sources. And I say that because one of the number one ways that, you and I both know this, that you can add traffic automatically is through paid ads.
Yeah. A lot of people are fearful of paid ads.
Dude.
Very fearful.
Yeah. And so the guys that I have worked with all have been either highly brilliant or above average in excellence range at paid traffic. So it's like, you know, that your marketing's so good that you can turn it on and test relatively quickly to generate some results.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of these coaches, they're not brilliant marketers. That's why they're going to all the marketers to learn how to market. You know, so what may take us, you know, $1,000 to find a winning creatives and winning hooks and headlines may take other people 5 or 10 grand, or they never find it. And it's just, so what I always taught people is set aside money every month and say, this is my marketing budget for the month. So like when I ran the restaurant, like we budgeted for marketing. It's like, hey, we're going to spend $1,200 this month. That's the goal. It needs to get spent, right? So if you're making 10 grand a month, do the best that you can to always live as low as you can, right? Keep your expenses down and say, hey, I'm going to invest $1,000 a month, or I'm going to invest $500 a month. I don't care if I lose that money. It's an investment. It's an investment in getting eyeballs onto my stuff. It's an investment on me learning the skill of media buying, which is vitally important. Not that you have to be an expert at it, but if you're going to end up hiring someone one day, you got to understand what they're doing.
Yep.
It'll automatically help you understand like what types of audiences want to see your stuff, which ones work, which ones don't. And you'll also be able to learn how to really learn to test real well, right? And not fall in love with your own brilliance of what you think works, rather than saying, I'm going to put this shit out there and the market's going to tell me whether or not it tests. You know, I remember when we were at Magnetic Marketing Super Conference, me and Dan in the green room, and Dan gets off stage from the repitch he did for Russell. And he comes back there and he's going, oh, Russell, man, how was that? How did I do? And Dan Kennedy goes, why are you asking him how you did? When we see how many sales you did, the results will tell us how you did. You don't need to ask him. Old curmudgeon Dan Kennedy keeping us all true to actually what matters, right? Like, so that's what I would suggest. Set yourself aside a budget and say, I'm going to, hey, if you have $500, like spend the $500, you know, spend the $10 or $20 a day on stuff, test different creatives, look at that stuff and learn that stuff. And the problem is that people look at it as, well, I need to get to break even as fast as possible. Well, yeah, of course you do. But you also need to invest in your business and your skills.
Yep.
You know, like, does Coca-Cola, is there people that don't know what Coca-Cola is on the planet? Like, some people call all soda Coke. That's how well known Coca-Cola is. But their advertising budget is still $1 billion plus every year. They spend it because they know they're learning from that. They're getting data, this, that, right? They're getting top of mind, making sure that they're all these different things. It's the same thing for us as small business owners, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah. And
compared to traditional media, social media ads are still wildly cheap. I know we've increased over the last, 5-6 years. I'm not discounting that, but compared to traditional media, it's still really cheap. If Michael Kelly wants to put up a damn ads and funnels billboard on the Suncoast Parkway by where we live, like, it's still going to be $2 to $3 grand a month.
Yep. That and
you're getting barely any data. All they're going to tell you is how many people are driving past it every day.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, is like the data that you get is very minuscule, and like Facebook, their AI has just gotten so much better at targeting. And as long as you understand creatives and copy, and like, you can go broad and still get directly to who you're trying to target, which is just amazing. And they're just getting better and better as they continue to get data from everybody that's advertising on the platform and all of that.
Dude, that's a good call out. That's been one of the biggest changes, because it used to be like, I need to be super targeted on all the interests and the audience and demographics. And it's not like that anymore. Like our last ad campaign that we ran, that we got to above break even, we started straight up cold broad, figured it out pretty rapidly. Facebook figured it out, like who to show it to. It was nuts. I was like, this is great, right? This is wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge advantage. But like you said, that data is what is most important to be able to make the decisions in your life, and then, or in your business. And then the second thing, I'm not going to like go on some long soapboxy speech about it, but it's just believing that you can go to 100K, that you're worth that you can charge that you can scale that. And then lastly, the other thing is most people are terrible at delegation. They have no idea how to hire people. They have no idea how to manage their day-to-day tasks. They don't know how to prioritize tasks, and they certainly don't know how to hire, train, and develop people in order to help them in their business to go where they want to go. I mean, that's the reason why Vern Harnish put people as the number one strategy on scaling up, is because it's the only way you can do it.
Oh, 100%. And I think, like most people, you can get to 100K a month as a coach with a VA, maybe a media buyer, and then somebody that is just helping with some systems and stuff. But once you get to 100K, like that's when everything completely starts to change, and you need to bring in an integrator if you want to be able to go from 100K a month to 300K a month, or 300K a month to $1 million a month. What do you think is like the biggest mistakes that you've seen when it comes to, like, when you come into a business like Dan Henry's and stuff like that? Like, what were some of the biggest things that you knew you needed to put in place right away in order for this to continue to be sustainable, in order to cut a lot of the fat, in order to just make sure that the entire team is indoctrinated and ingrained into how the actual business works?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that everyone should definitely do, whether they bring someone in like me or not. And that is, although the visionary doesn't need all of the things like the systems, the processes, and all of those things necessarily for themselves, the team does.
Yep.
So a lot of times what I see happen is like, and we're all, people are bad at this, and that is, well, since I can do it this way, like you should be able to do it this way. Or, since I can see that, like you should be able to see that, whether it's a mistake or it's a project or whatever the case may be. The thing that I've learned the most about people is that if you give somebody a system and a process to follow, it makes everything easier.
Yep.
Everything. It makes their job easier. It makes our ability to communicate about the job better. It makes accountability easier. All of these things are set up for a reason. It's like, the way I looked at it is I look at it like coming from the restaurant, of course. Like, when you go out to eat, like, what's like your favorite thing to get when you go to a restaurant?
I always get stuff that I don't necessarily want to or can't cook at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's usually like lobster or something like that, just because
I
just don't feel confident cooking it at home.
So steamed lobster tail, right?
Yep.
I have cut, this is just a side note, I've cut, prepared, and steamed so many lobster tails in my entire lifetime. I literally could do it with my eyes closed. So whenever we have you over to the house, I'll make lobster tails for us.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. But so if every time you went to that steakhouse, wherever you go, and the lobster tail was different every single time and didn't taste as good, wouldn't that drive you insane?
Oh, 100%. I know the
Right.
statistics even are wild with, like, if somebody goes to a restaurant once, there's only like a 20% chance they'll come a second time. And if they come a second time, then the statistic gets a little bit higher. But if they come the first time and then the second time is just a completely different experience, then the odds of them coming the third, fourth, or fifth time is just, it's nothing.
It's highly reduced. But the point that I'm getting at is that we have recipes that we follow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's a recipe that says, hey, if I do it this way, it's going to taste fucking excellent. And every time Michael Kelly comes into our restaurant, okay, he comes in once a month, maybe once a quarter. Most people on average dine at a restaurant 1.5 times a year because there's so many restaurants.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, man, I've really been looking forward to this lobster tail. You're breaking out, and then it's a shit, and you're like, damn, but it's the same thing in our business. There's a recipe to follow in the process that says, if we follow this process every single time, we know that we can achieve this result from it.
Love that.
All in love with the process, right? So we get into the process. That's what I did at the restaurant. I was obsessed with the processing and mapping everything out totally, right? Like we talked about in sales, like what does Grant teach in his sales training? You have to make the unconscious conscious, right? You have to elevate yourself into unconscious competence. Bradley teaches the same shit in his sales program. Okay, it's no different for people and their operations. It's no different, zero, because it's harnessing the power of the mind. Right. And so you build this process and you say, okay, do it this way. Well, I think we should do it this way. Okay. Why do you think that we should do it this way? Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on here. I agree with you here, but great. Awesome. You're the one doing it 40 hours a week. Your feedback's always welcome. But now we're going to lock arms right now and say, this is how we do it. Until we have a discussion to change it, this is how you do it every single time. So what happens is they build this muscle memory, right? And I learned it because of being a line cook. It's like I could reach for the tomatoes to make my mussels because they were in the same spot every time. I had done it so much that it became unconscious competence. I didn't have to think about where the tomatoes were. They were just there. We can do the same thing with the people in our business. Okay. They have that power as well because it's the power of the mind. So you get all of these things built up for them. And these are all the things, these processes that they have, and you beat them to death on the process. So then you get all those things set up and then that shit's good. You just have to follow up here and there. You have Slack reminders set up, right? Like we talked about, right? Like it's reminding me to remind you or remind you to remind me, hey, we're doing this shit, right? But the reality is then they become really good at that stuff. Right. And then you can praise them. Man, you know what? I haven't really seen any poor metrics on our client support emails. There's been nothing over 24 hours in 3 months. Incredible. Right. It's like, yeah, because you followed the ironclad process that if I do it this way every single time. Right. But the problem is, Mike, that's not fun. That's not. People love chaos, man. They're addicted to chaos. They're addicted to stimulation. And, even though you get charged up when things go wrong, you feel alive, you're charged up. It's like, nah, I like to keep shit as mundane, as boring as possible because I have predictable results. Okay. Because I got it set up like that in the restaurant because, dude, fucking toilet here, this equipment goes down, this cooler goes down, someone just slipped on the floor. Like you got all of these variables that you're dealing with all the time that if you're behind on the things that you make and do every single day, you're drowning. So it's the same thing for us in the small business space, right? Because we're smaller teams, so people have to be more dynamic and they have to take on more tasks that are kind of out of the scope of what their actual role is, right? because of the pressures of being small business. But if we can focus on being great at the basics, then when all of the variables come thrown in, whether, oh, this client wants a refund, or, oh man, we got all these chargebacks here, all these different things that are pulling us that are outside of the scope of the day-to-day business. Well, we're not so far behind on the regular shit that we can handle the variables with focus, attention, and care, and we're not buried, you know? So that's what I always go in and do. You immediately go in, you get to know the staff really well. I asked Dan, I did the same thing with Scott, same thing with Rudy. Hey, what is it, that all these people are supposed to be doing? What's their job? Then I go and ask them, hey, what is it that you think that you're supposed to be doing? There's always a disconnect.
Yeah.
There always is. So then it's like there's this gap of, this is the expectation of what I have of people on my team supposed to be doing. This is what actually I think I'm supposed to be doing. And then I worry about everything in the middle, and I create that cohesion, because most people, unless they're just an absolute turd, that's what I call people I fire, turds. Most people, they wake up in the morning and don't say, I want to do a shit job at my job today. I really want to piss my boss off today. You know what? I want to get into an argument with my CEO today. That'll be a great day for me. No one is saying that. It's just shit happens. It's disorganized mess, and there's no explanation. And then since there's a lack of clarity, there's a lack of accountability, and then it's just all wishy-washy. So I come in and create the cohesion between the exec team and the team to be able to create the momentum, to be able to drive and scale the way that we want to, right?
Love that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's cool, man. It's fun.
Do you ever create like a company course for new hires that kind of come in? Because I know when I worked for some corporations and stuff like that, like if you look at like Walmart, or I think I was going to work at Jiffy Lube and stuff like that, before you can even go out on the floor, like you have to go through a course that kind of teaches you what the values are, how you communicate with people, like literally everything, and kind of has some of those SOPs and everything in there. Do you ever do anything like that?
Yeah. We don't do so much as like a video, but yeah, we have core values built out. That was one of the things from my 90-day plan from coming on right away.
Okay.
And excuse me, that's one of the things that I learned, that again, it's not like a mission statement, and there's a lot of other things, that people do. I'm just a believer in, like, we need to set our core values. Yep. This is who we are. This is who we aspire to be. And these are the things in which that help guide us in our decision making and all facets of the business. So, I wrangled Dan in for him and I to get this done. And, it was great, and it was fun. And again, most visionary types, they don't give a shit about all that. They just don't. Yeah. Like, shut the fuck up and just get to work, and like, let's build this thing, But the problem is that like our team members really, really want that. Like, they're telling us vocally that they want this stuff. Right. And so then, like, that's the whole point. Right. And then my sale is always, to the founders of the companies, like, hey, do you always do what you want to do for your customers and your marketing? Or do you like talk to them in their language and do what you need to do in order for them to come into your world and get across the finish line? It's like, oh, interesting. There's this other thing in the business where, like, we want to meet people where they're at, like our team members. So let's do that. And these things are important. So then for once you get that built out, that's the greatest measurement of behavior, right? That's the measurement of our hiring decisions. That's the measurement of our assessments of performance with the team. That's the measurement of how we build our quarterly and annual goals, or all of these things. It's all encapsulated in that, because it's like, hey, if values are the clearest indicator, or is the ideal, right? And then how we behave is reflective of what we value most. If we align our behavior with these values, then we should be able to achieve these things that we're saying that we're doing, right? And so, yeah, getting those things built out is a fan. And then reviewing with every person that comes into the company is highly important.
Yeah.
We have a small team, so I just do it personally because I hire anybody that comes in. I don't necessarily do all the training and everything because we have other people, but they definitely get that kind of culture conversation from me so that they understand, like you said, how we behave. If you behave outside of the scope of this, you don't work here anymore, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, the reason I brought that up, because I was at the admin mastermind a couple months ago, and Cole Gordon came up and spoke on stage and all of that. And they actually have like a video course that they have all new hires go through, depending on what department that they're in. They have a specific course that they have them all go through that kind of walk them through the expectations, what they need to know, how they're going to do their job, all the KPIs that they need to hit, and all of that. So I was just wondering if that's something that you implemented as well, because I do see it being like extremely powerful, because everybody that comes through is trained on the exact same thing, and they just know what is expected of them from day one when they come into the company.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. When I was with Scott and when I was with Rudy, we had those videos, and they needed to take notes, and I would review the notes with them so that I knew that they watched it. Cole also has a large business.
Yep.
Right. So like his ability to do that with every single person that comes into the company is going to be highly limited, right? Like he's just not going to do that, right? Like, nor should anyone expect him to do that. But yeah, I mean, that's a great, if you're at that level, you're at that size, she has an 8-figure business, like, yeah, you have to systematize that, right? Yeah, I mean, it works well. It works well. Now, what I will say, though, you have to always couple that with personal connection.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So last question before we kind of wrap everything up. I know a lot of people struggle when it does come to hiring. And I know you just did a kind of presentation and everything on like how you hire people and interview and all of that. Do you want to kind of give like a brief explanation around that, just so if these people are ready to, you know, start building their team and really start scaling up and they just don't know what to do? Because I know I've hired a lot of people that I never should have hired, and like after learning from you and hearing what you had to say, there's a completely different approach that I go to when it does come to, you know, hiring my team and just making sure it's the right people fit for that position and just for the company organization in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were at our mastermind, and I was kind of super soapboxy with my freaking presentation, dude. Like, I'm super passionate about hiring because it's number one, it's so hard. Like you said, like it's just so hard. And you have to just fuck up so much shit to be able to learn how to do it right, you know?
Yep.
And the other thing too is like just people are people, you know, like I had a guy one time, like he worked with me for 4 years. He was a head trainer. He was a key employee. He was doing all sorts of stuff with me. He was one of my main guys. And one day the guy just never showed up. I didn't see him for 4 years. Then I saw him out one day. I'm like, "What's up, man?" He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" I was like, "What happened?" He's like, "I just left to become a teacher, man." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" He's like, "Nah, it's not how I do things."
What the fuck?
Bro, baffling, right? Like you never would have guessed it. But again, you never know, right? So that's one of the reasons why I have been very vocal about shifting how we think about hiring, because even if you are pretty good at it and you have a great system, it's still always an upward battle, right?
People are really good at bullshitting and very, very good.
Especially when it's something they want and they're in fear of not getting what they want. And since fear is so irrational, you'll behave irrationally, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let me lock in here. So I have a little bit of a different approach than most people do in terms of hiring, because there's 4 core competencies within organizational leadership: technical, functional, emotional, relational, conversational. Sorry, 5. So much we focus on the technical and functional, right? Especially in our business. Like, can you write fucking copy? Awesome. Here's the shit, go write it, and blah, blah, blah. I don't even care. But it's like, whoa. Like, am I going to get my best work out of this guy? Didn't even barely talk to him. I don't know who he is. He's coming on my staff, blah, blah, blah. So one of the things that I focus on the most is really getting clear on the technical and functional in terms of looking at portfolios and resumes. And then during the interview process or reference checks or whatever, I can key in on whether or not they're full of shit on that resume or not. Especially now with AI, you can polish it up and make it look really and sound good. So when I'm talking to you, I'm listening for detailed explanations on how you achieved specific results on the things that you have listed on your resume and the things that you've done that tie back to being able to produce that same result in my business for me, right? Those questions can happen very quickly. If you're not able to explain any of that stuff, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, okay? Anybody that's done anything well can explain it to somebody like they're 5 years old, right? It's like, I wrote this ad and we performed this well, blah, 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 whatever it is, right? I instituted this system and the project management software of ClickUp. You know, I showed 5 team members how to use the system, and now we use the whole social media content production on the system I built. But they, like, you can't tell me if you did it. You don't know how to explain it to me, right? Again, people are nervous for interviews, so I take that into consideration. But those couple of things are a very small part of the interview and hiring process, because it can be sniffed out so easily from a technical and functional standpoint. Okay. So boom, I move to the emotional, relational, and conversational part. And the reason why I focus so heavily on those is because when we fire people from the job, most of the time it's because they're full of shit, like you said, right? Which people think it's like technical or functional, but it's not. They're a liar. That's emotional. That's relational. That's nothing to do with them being able to do the job or not. Like they're full of it, right? Or, bad behavior, or they're not a culture fit, or all these different things, right? They don't play well with others. Like there's just so many things, right? But none of that stuff is like, you can't build a funnel, right? Or you can't use ClickUp or whatever, it's so I want to know who you are, especially in a small business. Our resources financially are limited. You need to take care of every dollar that you give to somebody. I want to know who I'm giving this money to, right? So, okay, like I said in the training before, well, if I'm talking to you, I'm like, who's Michael Kelly? Like, people don't even know how to answer that question because no one's asking them that.
Yeah.
No one's asking them that in their day-to-day life, let alone in a job interview. What? Who am I? And majority of the time, what people do is they'll start automatically going to their resume, right? I'm this, or I did this. I said, no, I'm not asking you what job you were at or what things you did. I want to know who you are. You're about to start spending a lot of your time with me, the most precious asset you have on the planet, and I'm about to give you money for it, which might be the second most important asset that we have on the planet, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't think that, well, guess what? There's people killing people for it. That's how precious it is to people. So then I say, so I want to know who you are. So then they start from there. Most of the time they're rattled a little bit, and I want to rattle them. I want to pull them out of this automatic interview mode. I want to say all the right things. I want to be all the thing. I want to be this persona that's going to make you like me and hire me. I want to bust you out of that and get down to your subconscious programming and see and hear how you see yourself. And then I'm also going to be listening to what you value, right? Because I want to see what it is that's important to you, so much so that you'll tell me about it.
Yeah.
That's very powerful information, right? And then the second question that I ask is, what do you do in your spare time when you're not working? Right? And I'm listening for this in a non-biased approach. I don't give a fuck what you say. I don't. Like you said, be fucking weird, you know? Like I've had a guy before tell me, oh man, dude, I'm super into politics. I obsessed over this. I read this, freaking read all these. And he's like just going off. And I could tell he was super passionate and super honest, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is great, you know? Because everybody else that met with him, like, dude, this guy's fucking weird. And then I'm like, nah, this guy knows what he likes and spends his time on doing what he likes. I want individuals. I want people like that. Like he's passionate about something other than just work, you know?
Yeah.
So then I listen to that. It's like, oh, most people are like, hey, like our example, the mastermind, it was like, oh, I spend time with my kids. I go out to eat with my wife and, I go fishing. And then it's like, oh, he's a family man. Okay. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, if something comes up that's going to be disruptive for work, it's most likely going to be family stuff, right? I also know, too, that he's highly motivated because he deeply cares about his family and he wants to be a provider and blah, 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 and all these things, right? So he's going to work hard. Okay, boom. All right, great. And then like, oh, yeah, he likes fishing. Good. He has a hobby. That means in some way he's taking care of himself. So those were the things that I heard, because again, I'm listening with a non-biased approach in terms of what those things mean to who he is. Right. And then lastly, I might say, and this is something that I've just integrated recently. And actually, I haven't even told anybody yet. So I'm telling you first. Why were those things important for you to tell me that? Why did you choose those things to tell me? So then it's doubling down on another question, right? That's very much deeper. You can't run from that question.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You can't, because now it's like the next level. It's like, well, why are those things so important to you? Well, now I'm going to get very, very good insight into how you see yourself, how you see the world, and how you show up in the world. And if I have insight into that, then right off the bat, I know what's important to you, what you value. Do the things that listed, do those and how you described it, do they match up with the values that I have set up in the business? I know what's going to probably motivate you most. I now know what to ask you about that's non-work related in the work setting, right?
Yeah. Love that.
Hey, how was it? How was your weekend with the kids? Be specific with your questions so all these things, right? And then so now you build that connection. So now you have somebody on your team, if you bring them on, like you actually know a little bit about them and you feel comfortable giving them money. Because if you don't, just because they're great at it, but every time you got to deal with them, you feel, or every time somebody on your team has to deal with them, they hate their interactions. Like just because they're performing well in that one segment of the business, like that erodes trust and is highly destructive to the team. Right. And that cancer needs to be removed. So those are kind of the things that I focus on in terms of hiring. And, I just keep going a little deeper and deeper and try to get into a flow of just a friendly conversation with somebody, making them feel as comfortable as possible to open up like a flower and get that guard down.
It's like a sales call. Like that's
exactly.
You want to have it be like a conversation and just let it flow and just let them tell you their deepest, darkest secrets. Just oh, I am gonna do a little here. Oh, dude, it's been a pleasure having you on here. If anybody wants to follow Joe, you want to let everybody know where they can connect with you?
Yeah, Joseph DiRoma on all platforms.
Love it.
Yep.
And that is Joseph, and then DiRoma is DIROMA.
That's correct.
Perfect. I appreciate it again, brother. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Well, there you have it. There is episode 1 of Experts of the Roundtable. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll be having many more of these convos and diving deep into what it really takes to be successful, as well as understanding more of the beliefs, values, and expertise of our guests. And I will see you on the next episode.